know how much they charge for it? $8 for like 3 fingers on an old fashioned glass. And we're like, don't tell anyone. Welcome once again to Chill Filtered, the podcast where I, for the time being, drink whiskey with someone else. So we drink whiskey so you don't have to. But you probably should, and you probably are. And that's why we like you. This is a very special episode of Chill Filtered this week. Before we get into the business, I just wanted to address, yes, Robbie is not in this episode, and Robbie won't be in a few episodes to come. So, we talked about it last week. Really happy for Robbie and the decisions he's making. But it kind of sucks in the meantime. Luckily, this week we have a guest, and he is a whiskey maker, and he's a founder of a great whiskey company, or at least I've heard. Haven't sipped this bottle yet. But before I get into any of that stuff, let's get into some business. Great way to support us this week is to hit us up on Instagram. We've got a lot of people hit us up on Instagram this week, and we appreciate all the words, especially regarding Robbie and the transition we're going through. And then, we're going to be transitioning a little more in the future. So keep that in mind. But I think that's the business for this week. So support us in that way if you can. Hit us up on Instagram. And but yeah, like I said, this week I'm about to bring him on. I have a very special guest. Let me even just before I bring him on, tell him or tell the world what I know about this whiskey. This whiskey is called Found North. And I've only heard of it through 2 of our listeners thus far. And then I've started to follow this YouTube channel. I forget what it's called, but I'm hearing great things about this whiskey. Ben Klepsig drank it. He said it was amazing. Brian Rapp said, I need to get a hold of one of these bottles. So I had to reach out, and we're going to bring him on now. We got Nick Taylor from Found North. How you doing, Nick?
Hey, what's up, Cole? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, totally. Like I said, I am excited to drink this. Basically, why I'm so excited is because I've heard things along the lines of from trusted people, BTAC worthy, top tier stuff, like hard to find, but it shouldn't be that hard. I think it's still on your website. Is that correct?
I think we have a few bottles left. This one has been going faster and faster. So
yeah, no, that's cool. We'll talk more about the batch and stuff like that, but some of the fun things I wanted to get talk about with you were tell me about the background of like how Found North started. It sounds like you're a whiskey fan, and is it your brother who you started this with?
Yeah. I launched this brand with my brother. Yeah, 2021 is when we released the first 2 whiskeys. But geez, Zach and I, our story goes way back. We like since we were little kids wanted to start a company together.
Nice.
We were very close as brothers, and we just we loved the idea of building something from scratch and just getting to work together every day. It really is.
That's sweet.
It's really fun. Yeah, and so we wanted to work together forever. We actually started a company in 2012 and got our teeth kicked in. Not having anything to do with whiskey or alcohol or anything like that.
Well, that's why, because it wasn't the good stuff.
Yeah. No, exactly. And we sort of split ways, and I got into whiskey, and I just fell in love with whiskey. I mean, honestly,
Nice.
I was like 23 years old when I just started absolutely digging whiskey.
Nice.
I started as a Scotch hound, really. And
that's hard to do when you're younger.
Yeah, it was an expensive hobby. And the interesting thing was there were a few whiskeys that I had early on that almost completely turned me off of whiskey because they were expensive and I didn't like them. And it was interesting at the time. I was reading a lot about whiskey, and 10, 11 years ago, there wasn't like this really informative online community the way there is now. Most of the information on whiskey was absolute nonsense. Literally,
mostly written by the distillery itself, saying this is the best.
By the marketing team, who doesn't know anything about the production. And so that was one of the main reasons I got really interested in it, because I started to discover that what I was being told was the sort of the driving factors in how the whiskey tasted and
Uh-huh.
what the actual driving factors were way, way far apart. And
Yeah.
I went right to the source. I went to Scotland. I was too young to rent a car, so
Nice.
I hitchhiked Scotland. I went to 40 distilleries in 30 days,
Are you
and
kidding me?
I pretended I was a whiskey writer,
Yeah,
and I got
yeah.
invited in. I mean, I just walked around and was like, "Yeah, I'm starting a blog, I'd really love
Yeah.
to learn about your process and where," and, uh, and I learned so much. I mean, I learned so much, and it just from there, it was like, I gotta be in this business. I'm
Love
fascinated
it.
by it. I got back to Boston where I'm from,
Mhm.
and I joined a really lovely chain of retailers in Massachusetts called Gordon's as their
Okay.
whiskey buyer. And
Nice.
it really it was so much fun. It was a fun couple of years, and then I told my brother, I was like, "Hey, let's try this again," you know?
Nice.
And so we started a company doing like a lot of brand education stuff, really like just
Okay.
trying to teach people about whiskey, and getting hired by a bunch of different Scotch brands and actually eventually
Nice.
like gin and rum and Armagnac and all kinds of stuff
Mhm.
to teach people about how the whiskey's made and how it actually affects the flavor. And
Mhm.
we kind of were chugging along doing that. We got an import license, and then COVID hit, and it
Oh,
was
really?
like we lost every single one of our contracts overnight. And
Everyone, wow.
we had no contract because we couldn't go into
Wow.
stores and
Yeah.
do tastings. We couldn't do any sales. We couldn't do anything.
Dang.
Um,
Uh-huh. Might have been a
and
good pivot from where I'm seeing this conversation going.
And so we were sitting there and we were like, "Shit, we've been doing this for 3 years."
Yeah,
And the dream was always to launch a brand, to not sell other people's whiskey,
totally.
as much as it was like a great way to kinda get into whiskey,
Mhm.
get our feet in the door.
Yeah.
Um, but, yeah, we Zach and I had a really serious conversation in, like, April of 2020, right when COVID was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, crap, this is real."
Yeah.
And we
It's
said,
not
"What do
going
we do?"
away soon.
Yeah, this isn't going away, and we had a little bit of money. We
Mhm.
had enough to sort of survive on, and maybe enough to buy a small amount of whiskey. But we
Nice.
knew we had about a year.
Mhm.
And so we were sitting there, we're like, "Could we launch a brand in a year? Um, or do we just close up shop and go
Yeah.
on to the next thing?" It's
Yeah.
like that's really where we were. And at the time, we had been looking everywhere for whiskey. I'm serious. Like
Mhm.
Scotland, Kentucky, Indiana, Japan. I've been to every distillery in Japan asking if they have whiskey to
No
sell.
way.
Like Poland. I'm not
Oh,
kidding. Like
wow.
literally every. We looked at Armagnac. We looked at rum once we couldn't find
Mhm.
good whiskey. But Zach had just been at Whiskey Live in Paris, which is I think the
Mhm.
best whiskey show in the world. And
Oh, that's cool.
and and he was there and he was meeting with some of the producers, actually from Canada, and they started
Nice.
telling us about some of the whiskeys they had available for sale, and it was great. They were crazy. It was like 13-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 18-year-old, 20-year-old corn, rye, wheat. We were
Mhm.
like, really, really,
Yeah.
this is for and so as we were having this conversation, we got samples, we got pricing, and um you know, we were always very drawn to blending, um,
Mhm.
which I'll get into in a minute. But basically, we started getting samples, and we were like, the quality here is exceptional, and the price is absurdly reasonable,
Yeah.
given these
That's
age
cool.
statements. And so I think between finding incredible liquid at just like at a price that's I hate to make it out to be like a value proposition kind of thing,
I
but
am.
when you go to Indiana and you're looking at 4-year-old bourbon that you're going to have to sell
Mhm.
for $100 a bottle to make any
Yeah.
money, and
Mhm.
it's not that it's bad. It's just that it's like, woof, there are,
Yeah.
hundreds of other brands that are doing
Yeah.
this. The
Mhm.
liquid is great, but it's not that different from one thing or another. And
Yeah.
and it's designed really, it's not designed really to give the the non-distilling producer like us a lot of
Mhm.
control over the final product.
That makes sense,
Um,
yeah.
and so
Maybe
when we went
finishing, maybe
exactly,
aging a
maybe
little
finishing, maybe you
longer.
could
Yeah.
tweak some things.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people do it really well. I mean,
Yeah.
Barrel does it
Mhm.
incredibly well, right? There's some
Totally.
people who do this kind of thing really, really well. Um,
Mhm.
but we were looking at this whiskey from Canada, and the first funny thing was we told them we were interested in starting a brand, and they said, "What do you want it to be? We'll send you blends."
Oh,
And we're like,
wow.
"Oh, we thought we'd blend it."
Yeah,
And they
yeah,
kinda
yeah.
laughed at us. They're
Oh,
like, "Do you
really?
guys think you're gonna blend this whiskey?" You know? Yeah,
How
we were
hard
like,
could it be? It's Canadian juice.
"Yeah, right, this can't be that hard?"
Yeah.
And so they were like, let's just send you some things and then we'll decide if you wanna blend it." And they would send us these blends, and the blends were pretty good, but
Yeah,
not nearly what we wanted them to be. And
totally.
and, like 10 percentage points away from each other. So what I mean by that is like, all right, this one's 80-20, rye to
Oh,
corn. This
gotcha.
one's,
Mhm.
70-30. This one's 60-40. And we're sitting there going, the, these are so different. Like there
Yeah.
might be something that's living in the middle of one of these
Yeah.
segments that we like, but this is like, so we were like, yeah, these, this one's too much this one's too much this one's too much this.
Mhm.
And then they said, "Oh, all right, we'll send you some more," and sent us more. We said,
Uh,
well, some of these are the, and finally they're like, all right, screw it, we'll send you the whiskey, you blend it,
nice.
and wow, did we make bad whiskey for the first couple months.
Oh, that's
Blending
great. I
is
love it.
really, really difficult.
Yeah.
But no, we eventually uh, uh, figured it out. When you're in a situation where it's like, figure it out of the company and everything you've been working on
Yeah.
for the last 4 or 5 years is dead. You
Mhm.
figure it out. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
for sure.
So we had a fire under our asses, and we ended up launching the first two whiskeys in just about a year after we said, and thank goodness they did well because we were we were broke. So
Totally. Yeah, you needed something to come
yeah,
in.
yeah, exactly.
That's
I mean,
amazing.
that's the
So
that's the
no,
gist
go
of it.
ahead.
Yeah. No, I was
That's
gonna say, so
amazing.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
I
thank you.
yeah, I have so many questions. I'll start with the
Oh, hit me.
randomest one first, and then I'll
Yeah.
dig into what you're talking about recently. Okay, first of all, before I forget, okay, we're talking scotch for a moment.
Yeah,
What
okay, I'm
is
ready.
your favorite scotch brand and maybe one of your favorite expressions? And you were working for some scotch brands, it sounds like, so you can't call them
Yeah.
out unless they're
Yeah, no, I
amazing.
can't. I can't. So it's interesting, I don't know if I've talked to a lot of people who've had this experience, but I don't know if
Mm,
everybody has this experience as they're getting into whiskey. But for
mm.
me, like, I liked whiskey, I liked whiskey, I liked whiskey. One day I had a very particular whiskey, and I from then on I loved whiskey.
Ah,
Um,
that's
you know what
exactly
I,
my story.
you know what I
So,
mean? Like that's,
yeah,
yeah.
that bottle back there, you can see it's an Eagle Rare 17. It's a
Yes.
2014 vintage. That
Oh
was the
man.
bottle that was
Yeah,
like,
that'll
I'm a
do it.
I'm a whiskey fanatic now. Yeah,
Yeah. That'll
like
do
I'm
it.
in it. Yeah, exactly.
The stag that year was also incredible. That was the
I
140 proof.
loved
That
that
was
range of
just
stags. 2016 is
incredible.
my favorite stag ever. It's like
I think 14 is
144.1
my
or something.
favorite. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
which one?
So, yeah,
2014. Oh man.
14.
So
Yeah, I
anyway,
think
we can
14 is my favorite. Yeah, 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 yeah. So for me, I was reading Michael Jackson's book, the Guide to Scotch,
Oh yeah, yeah,
not
the
the
other Michael
musician.
Jackson.
Yeah, yeah. It's
I was
always
like, he
funny to
wrote a
me
book?
you wrote a book about Scotch? No, yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny to think that, like, the most famous Scotch writer from, the 80s, 90s, 2000s, Michael Jackson, right? You're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
great." Um, but I was reading it, and he was like, I read this thing, and he said, "Drink the new Glendronach 15-year revival." And it was the
Love it.
Oloroso, not the one that they,
Yep.
because there was a break, right? It was the one that was
Yep. Mhm.
exclusively in
I remember that.
Oloroso, because they now have it in Oloroso and PX, and I like it.
Yep.
But the old one that was
Mhm.
in the Oloroso, particularly because of the kind of the time period where they weren't
Yep.
making very much in sherry, so they had to supplement it with older and older scotches.
Mhm.
And so, the 14-year was really like an 18-year with like a little bit of
Yeah.
14-year-old juice in it. I mean, sorry, the
Yep.
15-year was like the
Yeah,
18
yeah,
with
yeah.
a little bit of
Mhm.
15-year-old. Yeah. So
At first I was like, "Didn't know about that." Yeah, but go on, go on.
yeah. Yeah, so 2000, what was it? It's 1996 to 2002. They only put about 10% of the liquid into sherry. They're putting a
Didn't know
lot
that.
of it into ex bourbon. And so
Mhm.
if you kind of math out the 15-year and the 18-year in those periods when it was like 2002,
Mhm.
2017, right? So like 2016, 2017, we saw it go away because they just ran out of whiskey.
Yeah.
But the few years before that, you were drinking like ultra old Glendronach and
Mhm.
Oloroso if you were having the 15-year. Um,
Yeah.
and so I remember I was living in San Francisco. I went and got a bottle of it, and I was just
Mhm.
like, you know, seeing
Yeah.
colors, right? Like
Yeah,
seeing
totally.
my as flavor. It's like it was the first
Mhm.
time I had like a religious experience with whiskey.
Totally.
Um, and that was the bottle that did it. I love the distillery. I still love the distillery, but
Yeah,
I think I have other favorites. I have other favorites
totally.
now. I grew into some other things, but that was the first bottle that and it was expensive at the time.
Mhm.
Hilariously, it was like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
$80, and I thought that
Yeah,
was a
yeah.
fortune. I was like,
I
oh
remember
my
those days.
goodness.
Oh, that's so cool. It's funny, in terms of general Highlands, space sides, Glendro it's in a fight for Glendronach and Glen Grant for my favorite
Ooh,
Highland related distilleries.
I
But if I want sherry finish, of course Glen Grant's not really going to fit
it's not
that
gonna
bill.
do it for
So
you. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I it's always funny when I get asked what my favorite single malt is because I'm always like,
Hmm.
there are like 5 categories of it's like, what's my favorite
Totally.
peated single malt? What's my favorite
Exactly.
sherry cask?
Hmm.
What's my favorite interesting finish? It's like,
Yeah.
what's my favorite really old bottling, which is totally different from your favorite younger it's
Yeah.
it's kind of a joke to try to just pull one out of a hat and say
Yeah.
this is
At
the
this
one.
point, in whiskey journeys, it's like I could tell you my favorite. It doesn't mean it's like the best I've ever had, but I could tell you like
Yes.
all these different things. And like the funny thing is like when, you're probably a little older than me based on, you started a business in 2012, but like it's, at this point in a whiskey journey, it's like there's a story behind every sip too, or every pour, or every bottle you have, or like I look at my
For
shelf and
every
I have
bottle
probably
you
about
had.
150.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember purchasing every one of them and just like the story behind it and stuff like that. It's kind of
That's
fun.
incredible. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
incredible.
So anyway, Found North, you and Zach,
Yes.
took this one off, and you're up to batch 7. So how many batches are you putting out a year?
Let's say so we released 2 in April 2021. We
Okay.
released 2 more like kind of in December. We did kind of a soft launch in December that year, but really like
Nice.
early 2022. And then we did, when did we release 5 and 6? We released 5 and 6 at the end of last year and then 7 this
Okay.
year, something like that. I
Nice.
actually don't know. I think it was
No,
5 and
it's all
6 the
good.
end of 2022. Yeah, so
Okay.
we've been on that pace. We stopped releasing 2 at a time, and
Hmm.
we've just been doing kind of one at a time. We released batch 7 a couple months ago,
Yeah.
and we've got batch 8 lined up, and
Brewing.
we're getting it. We it's not ideal time to be finishing a whiskey
Uh-huh.
because you're trying to do all the sales this time of year.
Totally.
Um, but we thought batch 7 was going to last like most of the rest of the year, and we're pretty much almost sold out of it. So it's
Nice.
like, oh crap, we don't have any whiskey to sell. We need to make batch 8 very very fast.
Nice.
So we're cranking out batch 8 right now.
That's cool. So wait,
Yeah.
okay. Some whiskey, company co-founders, they will, get into it and then kind of let someone take over. Are you planning on being the blender? I mean, I don't is Zach involved in the
Okay.
blending as well?
So I would be, it's actually probably an insult to Sammy that I haven't brought him up in the last, I
Uh-huh.
don't know,
Let's
20
bring them
minutes.
up.
All right, so Sammy, we hired Sammy before we launched Found North. So Sammy was
Okay,
was
cool.
part of the design, the the whole thing.
That's cool.
And Sammy is a partner in our business. And he is we call him our director of whiskey innovation,
Nice.
which is an awesome title, better than head
It is.
brewer. And he and I, for the most part, the do the blending.
Mhm.
That being said, we definitely rely on Zach and Phil, our other guys,
Yeah.
to quality control and make sure we
Totally.
aren't. You can get totally down, like, it's funny because you can, when you work on something for a couple weeks, you get so far
Mhm.
down the rabbit hole that you start to get kind of blinders, and it can be
Yeah.
really helpful to
Mhm.
have someone come in and go, "Yeah, guys, this is interesting," but you realize it's really like bitter, and you're like,
Yeah.
"What?" Then you go back and go,
Uh-huh.
"Jesus, how have we been ignoring that for the last 2 weeks? We should
That makes
sweeten this up
sense.
a little bit." Yeah, and so
Yeah.
it's we're always gut checking with the rest of the team.
How many iterations would you say batch 7 went through, or even time length before you were like, "All right, we figured it out"?
Okay, all right, that's a
Uh-huh.
fabulous question.
I'm glad.
That's a really great question because it took us hundreds of iterations and
I
like
love that.
9 months to make batch one.
Really?
Yeah, I mean,
That's a long time when you're,
it
like, got
took
a fire under you know?
forever. Yeah, and
Yeah.
we I think we made nothing but dogs for the first 3 months, and then we
Uh-huh.
like went back to the drawing board and started over.
Okay.
And so it's pretty funny because by batch 5, which was the easiest whiskey for us to ever to make, took 3
Mhm.
test batches in one day. We had an
Nice.
idea and it happened to work. That rarely happens.
Okay.
But now, we have a better approach to this now, where
Okay.
we're very familiar with the components we're working with. We know how they behave together, which is,
Mhm.
in the beginning, you like, wow, it's funny because people describe blending as painting all the time, and
Mhm.
it's a good analogy in the sense that, like, you have your paints, you paint your picture kind of thing,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like, all right, these are your almost your tools, and this is the artistry. And I get the
Yeah.
analogy from that standpoint, but it's misleading because when you when you blend red and blue paint together, you
Yeah.
get purple paint. When
Mhm.
you make the analogous blend of whiskeys where it's like, okay, this one's red and this one's blue, you get
Yeah.
like lime green. You know,
Yeah, that
it
makes
doesn't
sense,
it
yeah,
doesn't
mhm.
it like
You don't
does
get,
not.
like, if
Yeah,
you're
you don't get
matching,
purple,
like
it
yeah,
does.
like the Jack Daniel's, mash bill of grains, you're like, "This will taste like Jack Daniel's." It tastes nothing like Jack
Nothing,
Daniel's or something like that.
nothing. No, yeah, no.
Yeah.
So it's rare that it really works, but after a while, when you've worked with the same types of components and
Yeah.
honestly, you've had a couple of years of blending under your belt,
Mhm.
um, I would say it probably took us 2 weeks and 20 different test blends to get
Okay.
batch 7
For
right.
batch 7.
Uh,
That's cool.
yeah, and batch 8 was similar, although it's very interesting. We've gotten much more precise with our blends.
Mhm.
Now we've gotten better at it, and so we're incredibly precise about the blends, to the point where we really need our partners in Canada to actually physically send us all the liquid, and then we
Nice.
blend it on our site. Whereas we used to just say,
Mhm.
"Okay, this is the combination," and you blend.
Yeah.
Here's what it tastes like. You blend it, and
Mhm.
and so if we got a little barrel variation, c'est la vie. Um,
Yeah,
and that was fine for batches 1 and 2.
for sure.
And actually it worked in our favor with batch 2. Batch 2 ended up tasting a little better than the blend we made.
Mhm. Oh, nice.
It was like, "Oh,
Mhm.
hey, whoa." um, that doesn't happen anymore. Like, now we know
Totally.
exactly how we want it to taste. So we send them a test blend, and they send it back with different
Okay.
barrels pulled and say, "We're scaling this up. Does it taste like you expect it to taste?" And we're
That's
going,
nice.
"No, this is 3 or 4 percentage points off of what we want."
Oh,
Not
gotcha. Yeah,
from a
yeah.
ratio standpoint, but just
Yeah,
if you
like,
can
taste-wise, yeah.
if you can
Mhm.
quantify taste, which you absolutely can't.
I
But
totally get it.
you're like, "This is not exactly what we made." And they're kinda
Mhm.
like, "Hey, assholes, like, what do you want from us?" "You're
Those
giving us
Canadians.
ratios, and we can't, we don't know exactly how you want it to taste. We don't, this
Yeah.
tastes like what you're sending us, and maybe you guys should do it." And we're like, "All right, yeah, maybe we should do it." So now the process, the interesting thing is we're getting more and more involved in the process.
Mhm.
And you sent me a hilarious prompt about chill filtration.
Uh-huh. Let's talk about it.
In
Yeah,
the
I
email.
basically was like, "Do you hate our podcast because you
Yeah,
are
yeah.
non-chill filtered everything?"
And it's a great question because
Yeah.
I have been on site in Canada and had chill filtered sample poured for me and filtered sample and
That's
non-filtered sample
cool.
poured
Uh-huh.
for me of the exact same liquid. And
Mhm.
then you try to blind ID which one is non-chill filtered,
Uh-huh.
and it is hard.
Oh,
It
really?
is. Yeah, it's not as easy as
Interesting.
people seem to think. Like
Yeah,
it's
people are
this
like,
easy. Oh yeah,
"Oh,
it's
you get the
drastically
texture and the
different. Oh, the
oiliness and
texture's all
whatever."
gone.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would say again, trying to quantify it, it's a, a percentage point, a couple percentage points different. I mean, it's not that different.
Yeah, yeah,
And
totally.
and you know, look at the antique collection. Half the antique
Yeah, yeah.
collection is chill filtered. It's like
Mhm.
it's not this mortal sin
Yeah.
that some people
Yeah.
tend to sort of try to get, I don't know, a little bit dogmatic about whiskey at times, and
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of that.
That's cool to
But
hear though, for someone who's tried it, like, literally the same, like, barrel almost, you
so
know?
and what's interesting is the reason we go for non-chill filtered is the same
Mhm.
reason that we do a lot of the different pieces that are more time consuming and a pain in the ass
Uh-huh.
and
Makes sense to me.
and total minutia because, like, all right, I'll
Mhm.
give you an example. Um,
Yeah,
we didn't come from the production side, which is really cool
totally.
for us because we all came from the
Mhm.
sales side. We all came as
Yeah.
bartenders, retailers, brand
Yep.
ambassadors, like totally different side of the business. And
Yeah.
so, when you're on that side and somebody tells you this thing makes a difference or this thing doesn't, you kind of take
Mhm.
them at their word. But then when you
Yeah,
get in the
production, yeah.
production process,
Mhm.
and weird things make a huge difference. So I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
When we've taken a single barrel out of wood and
Mhm.
left it in the ugliest little blue plastic, food grade tote you've ever seen, like
Yep.
nothing sexy. We're not putting this in a glass
Yeah.
demijohn. This isn't like, some magic we're doing. When
Mhm.
we let it rest for 2 weeks, the whiskey gets better.
Really? That's funny. Like,
Why?
notably? Is it most
Notably better.
cases?
Yeah, and it's 1 or
That's
2 percentage
crazy.
point. It's a little better, but it's
Yeah,
better,
yeah, yeah.
and
But
I
notably, yeah.
promise you it's better. We
That's
we
cool.
have we have a bottling line that uses a vacuum and a different one that uses, like, a pressurization, and one
Uh-huh.
puts a little bit of air through the whiskey as it pushes it into the bottle, and the other
Uh-huh.
doesn't, it kinda sucks it into the bottle.
Huh.
1 or 2 percentage point different. It's
Which
these
one gets the
little
win?
the one that pushes air through it.
Oh, cool, like aerating it a
Makes it
little bit,
it's
yeah.
almost like aerating it. I
Interesting.
don't
Yeah.
God only knows because whiskey doesn't oxidize it once
Yeah.
it's out of wood. It's not oxidizing,
Yeah.
it's too stable. So, like,
Mhm.
why is this at I don't know, but I'll tell you, like,
Things you
a 5
learn.
micron filter versus a 25 micron filter,
Uh-huh.
big difference in your whiskey. So,
Really?
well, big difference, not so much, make 1 or 2 percentage points.
Yeah.
But
Hey,
if you do
still.
this if you do this 10 times, if you make
Mhm.
your whiskey 1% better 10 times, like a
Mhm.
10% better
That's compound
whiskey
growth,
is a
baby.
lot freaking better. Yeah, hell
Yeah.
yeah. Yes, it is compound growth. And so
Yeah.
for us, like, do I think that most consumers can actually identify correctly 5 times in a
Yeah.
row non-chill filtered versus chill filtered?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Maybe.
I don't think they
Yeah.
can. But
Uh-huh.
if you stack those wins a little bit,
Mhm.
it does make a difference, and we care about that. And
So
so I think
interesting.
that's why we've sort of gotten into that and gotten pretty freaking neurotic about how we make our whiskey. I
Uh-huh.
mean, we're pretty OCD about kind of everything we do, and
Mhm.
I think it ends up reflecting well in the quality of the liquid in the end.
That's awesome. So, with this Canadian juice, are they 100% base whiskeys? Are they, like, 100% mash bills of every one, or
Great
are they
question. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah. So, when sometimes when I'm on a live stream or I'm on a podcast or whatever
Mhm.
it is, um, I'll say this And I used to get so mad at producers when they would do this to me, but now I get it because you're trying to like
Mm,
make it understandable for everybody.
totally.
So like the fundamental difference between Canadian and American, you just got into it immediately, is American always does a mash bill and Canadian
Yeah.
does these 100% corn, 100% rye, 100% wheat, 100% malted barley.
Hmm.
And the idea is ferment, distill the grain separately,
Yep.
gives you a few bit. It does give you some production advantages when the plan is to make it a component whiskey for a blend.
Yep.
And it definitely does. And I can get into that in a minute.
Mhm.
That being said, a lot of the ryes in Canada actually have a tiny bit of barley in them. So
Makes
when you
sense
look at,
for the sake of,
yeah,
some of that enzyme
well,
stuff.
well, they add the enzymes, and
Oh,
actually,
cool.
dirty
Interesting.
little
Okay.
secret:
Uh-huh.
ask a bourbon producer the next time you have them on if they're adding
Yeah.
enzymes, because they probably are.
Interesting.
Yeah. Um,
Huh.
Everyone adds them.
That's
And
so
the
cool.
and it's a math thing. Um,
Yeah.
because look, if you it's the same reason why there are so few whiskey brands that lean
Mhm.
into the grain varietal. They
Yeah.
exist, but very
Mhm.
few talk about it. And the
Yeah.
reason is that when you're a distillery, if you get if you have a grain varietal that this particular year has a 30% higher starch content, you're going to get
It's a big deal.
30% more alcohol in your production, which
Really?
is
Huh.
because look, you convert starch to sugar, you
Yeah.
convert sugar to alcohol through fermentation.
Mhm.
So everything up until everything up until really the fermentation and the distillation, they
Yeah.
care about yield because they
Yeah.
know how much they can positively affect the whiskey in other parts of the process. They have so
Makes
many
sense.
levers to pull later. Um, and so, the Canadians started adding enzymes in 1910, something like that.
Oh, wow. That's
And
fun.
that's when and it was all about creating things for blends. Um,
Mhm.
the bourbon industry started doing it. I don't know when, but they
But
do it.
later? Okay.
Yeah, but later, and
Yeah, yeah.
they don't talk about it because they're like the whole gig on bourbon is that it's the purest of the purest of the pure, right? That's why we
Totally.
have this
Yeah.
obsession with new oak, and we have this
Yeah.
obsession with you're legally not allowed to add anything to it. Well, you actually are
Totally.
legally allowed to add enzymes, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just
That's
like
cool.
not something that you'll ever
Yeah.
hear on a tour
Yeah,
in
totally.
a
You won't hear,
bourbon
like, Buffalo
facility.
Trace
Oh
saying that.
yeah,
Yeah.
hi, we're
Mhm.
here at such and such big ass distillery, and this is the
Yeah.
part where we add enzymes. It's like what?
That's crazy. I didn't really know that. That's so cool. So
Yeah,
yeah, go
pretty
on. You
fun.
were talking about
Yeah,
base
yeah, yeah.
whiskeys and
So okay, so the component whiskeys we use, some of them are categorized as base whiskeys.
okay.
I hate that term.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just it pains me.
Uh-huh.
The Canadian whiskey industry, like Canadian whiskey is number one selling whiskey in the United States from
Not
1865
surprised.
until 2010.
Oh yeah, not surprised at all. Yeah.
Right? Like, we think about all of these up and coming categories, and you compare the
Mhm.
growth from, and it's like, "Oh, Irish whiskey, 2000 was doing less than 1,000,000 cases in the US, and now it's like 7,000,000." And you're like, "Holy
Yeah.
cow, 700% growth. That's crazy." Rye,
Mhm.
it's like 50,000 cases in 2000, and now it's, 2,000,000 cases. Holy moly.
Yeah.
Canadian whiskey was doing 15 million cases in the United States in 2000 and 20 million in 2020. Like,
Goodness.
Canadian whiskey absolutely slaps around the other
Yeah.
categories, which is absurd to think about.
Yeah.
Um, but
Mhm.
on the premium side, Canadian can't really get a foothold.
It makes
And
sense.
part of the reason is they've kind of allowed the rest of the whiskey world to name their stuff. Like,
Yep.
Jesus, how do you let the rest of the whiskey world name your stuff base whiskey? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
God, you want to make it sound as like unsexy as humanly possible. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, base whiskey or light whiskey, God forbid, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but yes, so I tend to, whenever you hear me saying corn whiskey, that's because I just
Mhm.
don't have the patience for the term anymore. Um,
Well,
but really,
I'm glad you could explain it at least.
yeah, so really what the truth is, what the Canadians are doing is they're using a bunch of different distillation techniques. So they'll
Okay.
do single column distill, they'll do, something like a bourbon distillation process where they'll do a stripping run and then double it in a
Totally.
pot still. They'll do something like
Mhm.
the Scots where they'll do like twice in a pot still.
Mhm.
But one of the things they do, and they do extremely well, is double distilled in a column still.
Okay.
And they will distill that to a very high proof, above
Okay.
180.
Really? Okay, cool.
And
It's like vodka
and
proof almost.
vodka proof, baby. No,
Yeah.
and one of the things that people talk about is like, oh well, you lose all the congeners.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of. You lose some of them. But really, when you then water it down to a different filling strength,
Mhm.
the interaction between the wood and the distillate is excellent. It actually is really
That's a good
straightforward,
point.
and it creates these whiskeys that are very, very, very useful for blending because they do one or two or three things max, and they do them very, very well. So what I mean by that is like one of the reasons why we made crappy whiskey for the
Mhm.
first several months was
Yeah.
because we had complex whiskey that was like, you know, pot distilled here, and
Yeah.
complex whiskey that was pot distilled over here. And we were like, this is a good complex whiskey. This is a good complex whiskey. We're
Yeah.
going to put them together, and we're
We're
going
gonna
to get
get
a super
purple.
good, super
Yeah.
complex whiskey that's purple.
Yeah.
Um, and that was when we started realizing that the painting analogy is not great. It's much more like making music.
Oh, wow,
If you
yeah.
have a great drum solo and you have a great
It's a
guitar
good point.
solo, and you put them
Mhm.
together,
Might
but
not
they're not
work.
on the same timing sequence, and they're not,
Yeah.
they're not, they don't match each other in any way or shape or form. You know what you're going to get? A loud cacophony of crap.
Yeah, yeah,
You're
yeah.
just gonna get a
A lot of
lot of
static.
noise. Yeah,
Mhm.
and so what really started to help us, was when we actually started using these double distilled corn whiskeys, because they they were like a good layer of flavor,
Mhm.
right? It wasn't flavor all over the place. It was, okay, we have this whiskey that has all of these beautiful top notes, and actually may also have a bunch of beautiful, bottom notes, but we
Mhm.
really need to fill in some of the body. And we have
Totally.
this corn component here that was aged for 13 years in ex bourbon and then transferred and regaged into new American oak for another 7 years, and it's
Interesting.
juicy and sweet and straightforward, and all of a sudden it was like fitting puzzle pieces in where you're like,
Yeah.
oh, this is why the
That's pretty
Scots and the
cool.
Canadians have been freaking doing this for the last
Yeah,
100
yeah.
years, right? Like,
Yeah.
they get it. Um,
Yeah.
and it's funny when that happens because, when I was on the buying side, I was a
Mm.
much bigger whiskey snob than I am now.
Uh-huh.
I
I
was
feel
like,
that.
"No, I won't drink blended scotch." I'm such
That's
an
how I felt
asshole, right?
before I started this podcast too, yeah.
It's like,
It's
"This is
like,
such an
"Oh,
idiot."
Johnny Walker?"
Oh, Johnny
Yeah.
Walker, no. And then you're
Yeah.
like, "Holy cow, they can make this
Johnny
stuff
Walker could
taste
be
the same
great.
over and over and over and over again?" That is incredibly
Mhm.
difficult.
Yeah,
So
it's true,
yeah.
yeah.
And so we really started having breakthroughs when we started matching the different, styles of distillate and the different
Nice.
aging regiments, in a better way. That
Mhm.
was really like the big breakthrough moment. So for us, what we do now is we pull samples of a bunch of different lots that we own in Canada, or that we
Cool.
have. We re-rack a lot of stuff, here, actually
Mhm.
up in, Dover, New Hampshire, where we have our warehouse.
Okay.
And so
Nice.
we'll pull a bunch of samples that are representative of whiskeys we own, right? It's not
Mhm.
like we're taking every single barrel sample. If it was of the
Yeah,
same
yeah.
lot, it's pretty damn close
Mhm.
to, and you do get
That's cool.
variation. You have to deal with that.
Makes
Um,
sense.
but for the most part, that's how and then over time, we know if you combine this kind of rye with this kind of rye, it's going to work. If you combine these, you're going to, this is what you're going to get. And the interesting thing, I would say the biggest change that happened for me was I used to focus a lot on tasting notes.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm getting, like, I would drink a whiskey and I'd be like, I'm getting apricots and plums and,
Yeah.
the orange blossom water on a sunny day,
Mhm.
all this like,
Yeah.
I would try to get really into it. And I still do that, to be fair. I just don't do
Uh,
that when I'm making whiskey because it's a totally
yeah.
useless process when you're making whiskey. What we really think about is the structure of the whiskey, particularly as it progresses through time. So
Yeah.
what I mean by that is like whiskey isn't static. That's the other reason why the painting analogy is bad, because the painting analogy
Uh-huh.
gives you this impression that like you paint the picture
Yeah.
and then it's static, it's done, right?
Mhm.
Whiskey, even if the whiskey, even if you taste the whiskey for, you know, if it has a long finish, maybe you taste the whiskey for 30 seconds. If it has
Yeah.
a short finish, maybe it's still like 5 or 6 seconds. There's
Totally.
still an enormous amount of opportunity for the whiskey to have shape and evolve and change on the
Yeah.
palate. Um,
Mhm.
and so the the tasting notes became very unhelpful because really what you're trying to do is make sure that the whiskey is telling a consistent and evolving story as you drink it.
Makes
You
sense.
want it to have a very distinct palate. You want it to have a very distinct landing palate and finish, right? You don't
Yeah,
want the
yeah.
whiskey to
Mhm.
have a great landing, right? You take the initial sip, you get a burst of flavor, and then
Yeah.
there's this like pause, and then there's a finish. Have you tasted whiskeys like
Mhm.
that? I taste them
Yeah, yeah.
all the time now that I
Yeah, where it
started
just
making
drops
them.
off, and then it's like,
It
"Oh,
drops
there it
off and then
is."
it
Yeah.
comes back. There it
Mhm.
is. You're like, "Oh, what
Yeah.
the hell happened?" Um,
Yeah.
for me, that's a it's not necessarily a flawed whiskey, it's just an incomplete whiskey.
Yeah, yeah.
And with blending, what we're trying to do is we're trying to give it we're trying to give it shape and dynamism
Yeah.
throughout the entire process.
Yeah. With, I had a follow-up question to that, but yeah, I think that's
Well,
so
give me
cool.
2
You
seconds
you
of
talk
time.
about, like, puzzle pieces and stuff, and as opposed to, like, what you'd expect of blue versus red, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, this is
Yes.
easy. It'll work together," and
It'll
yeah.
work. It'll work.
Mhm.
And weird things happen. Really weird
Yeah.
things happen. The really interesting thing is like when we were making batch 7,
Mhm.
sorry, when we were making batch 8, actually. We were
I
making
gotcha.
batch 8, um, we we had this component that was bringing a little bit too much woodiness, and as
Okay.
a result, it was bringing a little bit of astringency,
Totally.
and, um, rye spice tends to be, um rye spice tends to also have a degree of bitterness. The kind of
Yeah.
baking spices can be a little bitter and a little
Yeah.
astringent. And so the
Mhm.
crazy thing was we were trying to correct for this. We were trying to correct for this, and we loved what the whiskey was bringing, but it also was giving us a little too much on the astringent side. And so we were trying to blend in whiskeys that were softer whiskeys so that they would soften up this flavor,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
wasn't working at all.
Mhm.
And the fix was actually to add a really spicy rye.
Interesting.
Um, and that is such a weird phenomenon because,
Yeah.
um, like tannin fixes astringency, which is
Uh-huh.
really weird. Because you're like, why would dry plus dry equal less dry?
Yeah.
It feels like it won't make sense. But hear me out for 2 seconds. So
Yeah.
basically, astringency is when you have this like um, bitter, almost. I've always described it as someone's poking you in the roof of your palate with a number
Uh-huh.
two pencil, a sharpened
Okay.
number two pencil.
Yeah.
Uh, when you get tannin is much more mouth coating. It's a similar
Okay.
sensation,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but it's stretched out. So
That does
okay,
make sense.
when you have an itch on your hand, let's say you got an itch on
Mhm.
your hand. When you scratch that itch, what you're doing is you're not an itch is an irritated nerve. You're not
Yeah.
unirritating that
You're
nerve. What you're
irritating it
actually
further.
doing, you're irritating all the nerves around it so that your
Yeah.
brain can't process that one really irritated nerve
Interesting.
anymore. That's literally what
Makes
scratching
sense
an
to
itch is.
me.
So the same thing
That's so
happens on
cool.
your palate sometimes where you got a little astringency and you add tannin, and the
Yeah.
tannin is giving you more of kind of a mouth puckering feel all around where the astringency should be. And
Yeah.
so the astringency disappears.
Yeah.
And it's wild how that
Weird.
works. And that's one of those things where like where you're trying to make purple, so you keep adding red, you keep adding red, you keep adding red, and it's not
Yeah.
working. So instead you add like a different shade of blue and all of a sudden you have purple. And it's like,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
shouldn't make sense, but it
Mhm.
works. Uh, so that's a little bit of the 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 weird conversations that
Yeah.
Sammy and I have when we're like 7 whiskeys in trying to make a good
Uh-huh.
blend.
That's great. So you mentioned like, you know what? I'm gonna let's crack this, and I'm gonna
Okay,
take
yes.
my first sip ever.
Oh, baby.
But when we do that, I do want to ask. You mentioned that batch 5, you got it pretty quick. You had something in mind, and you kind of nailed it really quick.
Yeah.
Does every batch have something different in mind? Are you aiming for something different in every batch?
Yeah, that's a great question. So sometimes we really are trying to sometimes we're really trying to do something specific. With
Yeah.
batch 5, it was we had a secondary grain that was wheat.
Yeah.
And we had a thesis on um how to make the wheat work. Wheat's a
Uh-huh.
frustrating grain. Um
Yeah.
it's really jagged. It like
Yeah.
it
Okay.
has all these rough edges, but it has lovely
Totally.
flavor.
Yeah.
And it tends to be really abrupt. So you get like a
Hmm.
blast of flavor and then it's gone. And so our very simple strategy was, let's take 8-year-old delicious wheat and
Hmm.
let's lay it on top of a foundation of super old, really clean, really delicious corn that was in new
Okay.
American oak. So it had this really
Yeah.
long developed body. And
Yeah.
it just worked perfectly. And that doesn't
That's
always
so
happen. You know,
cool.
that was very much like thesis, experiment, wow, result.
Yeah.
Almost never happens like that for us.
Yeah.
Usually what we're doing is we have a component or a whiskey that we really want to work with,
Mhm.
and we're tasting it and we're saying, what could happen if we tried this, that, or the other thing?
Yeah.
And so we try it. And then as soon as we try it, it's like it could go where we expected, or it could
Mhm.
go in a different direction. And sometimes
Totally.
that different direction is wonderful. And so you're like,
Yeah.
whoa, okay,
Maybe
hold
we
on.
should go
All
there.
right, let's go that way.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
we get asked all the time, like, are you gonna make an age stated whiskey that you just, like
Mhm.
the Found North 12 year, and it's just the Found North 12 year over and over and over again? And
Yeah.
the answer is probably not.
Yeah, that's cool.
Because what if we want to use the 11 year? Like what
Yeah.
if the 11 year
Mhm.
is doing something
Yeah,
cool?
what
And
great. Yeah.
it's like, um, God, I feel like the scene from Old School when Will Ferrell is in the group therapy, and he's like, I wonder, what if it's something I've never heard of before? Sorry, I don't know if you know the movie reference, but
I
anyway,
haven't,
it's like,
but I'm a big Will Ferrell fan, so
okay,
yeah, but I guess not big enough because I still need to see
I,
that.
so basically, it's like we talk about it. We say it all the time. Follow the whiskey,
Mhm.
and we really believe that. So we'll
That's
come
cool.
into it with an idea, but if the whiskey takes us in a certain direction, we follow it.
That's so cool to me, and that you're, even starting a company based on no guidelines. Like, I imagine, you're probably not messing around with, like, too much less than 8-year juice, but, like, if you're like, "Hey, this 6-year stuff is killing it," like, I wouldn't be surprised if you like, it sounds like with these
Yep,
batches, it's just like, it's not about age, it's not about consistency, it's about, "Hey, this is different, and it's fantastic," which
yes,
I appreciate. And like if I were to ever start a whiskey company, I feel like I would want to do similarly. Is like I'm not
I
going for
appreciate that.
consistency. I'm going for whatever wows me. And whatever comes along the way that wows me, I'm down to share that. So that's so cool.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's epitomizes what we try to do. So
That's awesome. So I only had one little sniff, and I didn't want to like interrupt you.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it is so candy fruity to me in a great way. I like especially when it comes to like rye whiskey and stuff. I'm looking for like a hard candy kind of feel, really nice sweetness, baking spices. I'm into that, but like I'm looking for like hard candy, like less chewy caramel, a little more hard candy. This is
I
like
couldn't
the
agree more.
perfect blend of almost like a weeded whiskey fruitiness, or we did bourbon fruitiness with that rye candy, at least on the nose. I don't know. What do you like to get off this nose?
So that hard candy flavor,
Whew.
I love that flavor. I It's my favorite part of It's actually my favorite. This is so funny, but just to bring me back to my Scotch days, it's my favorite part of
Uh-huh.
Islay Scotches.
Nice.
If you drink a couple of Islay smoky Scotches in a row,
Yeah.
um, your palate will habituate to the smoke, and so you stop
Yeah.
smelling and
All
tasting the
you taste
smoke,
is the
and then
sweet and the peat. I
and then
mean,
you
like,
start
yeah,
to
it's
this
just
sweet, and you get this like really interesting. It's always this really lovely hard candy note,
totally
and so I'm obsessed with it. I think
nice.
Ardbeg does it the best.
I
That's not
agree.
my
I was
that's
hoping I could bring that up. Ardbeg
so
does nail
that's
it.
it. I think Ardbeg does it the best, and I'm
I
obsessed.
agree.
Um, yeah, we finished a whiskey in an Ardbeg cask, and it was unreal. Like a
Really? Was it one of
juicy
your batches?
It's one of our single barrels. We
Oh,
we we did it. We created a blend and then we recask it into a bunch of different barrel
sounds so
types. It's the
good.
only way we can do single barrels.
Yeah.
And we had this like standing liquid Ardbeg cask that we filled with 12-year-old a blend of 12-year-old,
Yo.
19-year-old, and 21-year-old whiskey. And
What?
oh my god, I sold it to the first guy who ever hired me
Oh, that's so
at Gordon's
cool.
here in Boston,
Uh-huh.
and it's unbelievable. Sorry, I
No,
totally
you're good.
digress.
No, I
Yes, I
could I
know
could
that
talk
note you're
about
talking
Ardbeg
about.
for
I'm
days.
obsessed with that note.
Yeah, I love candy and man, it is so yeah. And as always, listeners, no matter who's on the podcast and who sends me or doesn't send me whiskey, we try to be objective. But so far I'm loving this.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just nosed it so far, but yeah, candy, fruity. Can you tell me a little bit about the ages that went into this one? Can you even
Yeah,
explain? I don't know if
I
you
can
can
tell
get
you all.
into the
Yeah, it's 4 whiskey. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
yeah. No, yeah, even the blends that went into it. Yeah.
So this was a blend of 4 different whiskeys. It's an 18-year rye, 2 22-year corns, and a 24-year corn. Um, the 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 18-year rye was 18 years and 11 months and change.
Okay.
We could have waited like 3 weeks and put a
Don't
19-year
matter.
age statement on
18's a
this.
lot.
But but seriously, and the funny thing was like we were like, what if it ages out of profile in 3 weeks?
Totally. I
In the
would
middle
worry
of the
about
summer,
that. Yeah.
like, what if it
Mhm.
ages out of profile?
Yeah.
But the rye was really big, spicy, Hungarian oak aged, which we're obsessed
Yeah.
with. And
Why
but the
Hungarian? Was that just what
Hungarian oak,
Canadians were aging?
we bought a bunch of whiskey from Canadians who are aging stuff in
Mhm.
Hungarian oak, because Hungarian oak is tight grained and has a high
Mhm.
concentration of wood sugar, so it tends to throw a lot of those like rock candy notes you're talking about
Yeah.
without and it develops these really interesting fruit qualities
Yeah.
without the over oaked flavor that you usually get
Yeah.
as a cost for these flavors, right? Because like if you
Yeah.
put something in New American oak for 20 some odd years, you're gonna get these really interesting rock candy and fruit notes,
Mhm.
but the price you pay is the pencil shaving note, right? Like that's
Totally.
the price. And
Yeah.
and people get used to it. And people get used to it, so it's great. But
Mhm.
for us, it was like, wait, we can have our cake and eat it too? You can just like you can get the spice, the wood profile, you get all of this without like that bitter oakiness. Holy
Yeah,
cow.
totally.
So that's the main reason we
That's
used that.
sweet. So, I'll tell you my notes on, the palate. So, this is 131.8 proof, but reads at like a 105 to me, which is good. Yeah. And, okay, so here this I hate to compare it, but this reminds
Compare
me
these
of
comparisons.
the beefiness of a Thomas H. Handy
Mm.
mixed with the amazing age of a Sazerac 18. It does taste more rye to me. Um,
Despite the fact that it's only 16% rye.
yeah. And so that's the cool thing I'm getting from this is that, like we were talking hard candy and fruitiness, but the cool thing is that yeah, I can tell the heat's there, but it's not 131 on the palate. Like it is not. And even on the nose, like it I mean 105 is what I'm getting.
I,
And uh-huh.
I totally, I And the
So
crazy,
you
I'll tell
put
you the
up like
craziest thing.
1.5. Were you like on the exact same page as me?
That's how I think it drinks. 105. That's how I think it
That's
drinks.
so funny.
105. I literally was like 1.5. That's what I
Yeah,
thought you were
and
gonna go
as
with.
I was
That's
saying
what
it,
it
I'm
tastes
like,
to
"Wait,
me.
is that exactly?" That's so cool. But yeah, that's what I'm getting is like slightly above 100, definitely not 110. But it's to its benefit. I think, sometimes with, especially in the 130s, like you can wreck like for example, like Jack Daniel's Barrel Proof. That'll wreck you at 130. Like it may not wreck you, but it's good. But it'll like you have to take that slow. You do not have to take this slow. Like this
No,
is
it's
this is
scary.
so easy to put
This
down, but
whiskey is pretty
also yeah,
scary.
candy. What I love about Sazerac 18, for example, one of the ones we
Yeah.
got to try it a few years back at 2020 on the podcast, and one of the bigger notes I got was what do you call it, like strawberry like sauce that you'd put on like
Mm.
ice cream or something like that.
Yeah, like it's strawberry puree.
Really,
Yeah.
yeah, beautifully 90 proof fruitiness and in a sweet and not like, it wasn't like fresh strawberries because fresh strawberries can have almost a bitterness to them sometimes. It was
Yep.
like beautifully candy. And then Thomas H. Handy was a little bit hard that year, in my opinion. But it had a little more oomph. And so, like, my thought, and that's the thing about Thomas H. Handy. It's not even 7-year-old rye, and it's like,
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
up to 130 proof. Um,
And it's
but
always
I
being
think this
drunk
is kind of in
next
the
to
middle.
it's always being drunk next to Sazerac 18. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like, I
totally.
always feel bad for Handy because you're just like, "Come
Uh
on,
huh.
man." It's like, this thing is
So,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah. The first experience I had with Thomas H. Handy was earlier on in my whiskey journey, basically. Same bar I tried uh, the Eagle Rare 17 2014 vintage. They had the 2014 Handy and Saz 18. And we're like, why not? And you know how much they charged for it? $8 for like 3 fingers on an old fashioned glass. And we're like, don't tell anyone. And it was like, that was 2014, 2015 for you, where it's
What
like,
the
shut
hell?
up. Don't tell anyone. Go to McCormick. It was like Mackenzie's in Colorado Springs. It was a steakhouse. Don't tell anyone. Don't do anything. Just show up every weekend and drink what they have and try not to just, drink the whole bottle. It was amazing. But that was where I got to try both of those, Thomas H. Handy and Saz. And I remember thinking, Handy's a bus. But like Sazerac is this like beautiful, like up and down this windy road. And so that's kind of, I'm gonna take a little more sip, but
Wait till
this
you give this
is
wait till you give this a little
beautiful.
water. Wait till you give this a
Oh, now
little
you're talking.
water.
Okay, one more sip neat, and then I'm gonna
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. So actually,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I'll let you I hate talking when people
Oh,
are
you're good.
tasting. So if you look at the back of the bottle,
Yeah.
you'll
Whew.
see you'll see a little we wrote something on there, the thing called manager's proof. So it
Uh-huh.
says the manager's proof is our preferred strength for a given whiskey. To reach batch 7 manager's proof, add zero point 0.6 mils
I
of
love the
water
science.
to a
Uh-huh.
50 ml pour and let rest for 10 minutes. We don't
Ooh.
need to do that. You can just give it a little water.
Okay.
We do these we make these water droppers that
Yeah,
have
yeah. Like measurement on them.
you're not gonna be sad. It has like the little measuring on them.
Yeah, yeah.
So we can get pretty geeked out
Do you
on
have like a
that.
tasting room at the place? Like, do you have like tours and stuff?
No, this is my tasting room. This is
That's
my
cool.
basement home office
Nice.
tasting experience place. No, but it's interesting because that brings the whiskey down to like 130.2, I believe.
Uh-huh.
We're not talking about changing this whiskey by,
Yeah.
we're not talking about taking it from 132 down to,
Yeah.
105. We're talking like put a smidge of water in. And we had
Yeah.
an interesting dilemma because uh we had an interesting dilemma because legally cast strength just has to be within 2 proof points of um what it came out of the barrel at. So you
Okay.
don't you can add a tiny bit of
Interesting. I
water.
didn't know that.
Uh
That's so cool.
yeah. And so there for us there's a bit of a debate. It's like, do we water it down and still call it cast strength? Or
Yeah.
do we call cast strength at the actual strength and
Yeah.
then tell people where we like it?
Yeah.
And we went with that because the 1998 component in here was a
Mhm.
bombshell. It had
Nice.
body and fruit, and all that like strawberry you're talking about, that puree
Nice.
was there. And then for whatever reason, when you put a smidge of water, it pops. The fruit just
Nice.
pops. So I'm gonna do that.
Mm-hmm. This is, if you had handed me like a little pour of this and you said, this is 131.8,
You would have given me the finger.
I wouldn't believe you. And that's cool, to be honest. Like, it's like, this is so drinkable. This is like a 105er. Let me sip that again. Because it did truly. Yeah. Great finish. Like, I haven't sipped in like 45 seconds probably. And the finish is still going. What batch are you most proud of?
Batch 7.
Mm-hmm.
Batch 7. I'm batch 7 and batch 1.
Okay.
Right? Like batch
Nice.
1 because someone once asked me to sign a bottle of batch 1. You know what I mean? Like
Nice.
there's a thing about that where you're like, when you're doing it, when I was in 2020, now I feel like a whiskey maker. I go to a show and people treat me like I'm a whiskey maker, and like I've gotten used to that. But it was weird in the beginning. It was like, I remember the first time someone asked me to take a picture and sign the bottle. And
That's so
like,
cool.
I was like, me?
Yeah.
What? But it was like, oh wait, yeah, we spent 9 months making this whiskey, and it was kind of hellish trying to figure it out, and knowing what good whiskey tastes like, and having really high standards for what we want it to taste, and then it comes out, and you're like, this is a damn good whiskey. And I remember like sending a bottle to Lou Bryson and getting on the phone with him,
cool.
and him just being like, Nick, this whiskey's phenomenal. And I knew him before we
hearing
started
that from
making it, and
Lou Bryson is so
he was
cool.
like, dude, this whiskey's amazing. Like, you've made an amazing rye. And I remember just being like, oh my God,
that's great.
Did what?
Was it,
but
which batch was it? Was it batch 1?
It was 1. Yeah, batch 1.
That's
he was
cool.
like, this is incredible. And I was like, wow.
His book was one of the first books I ever finished in the whiskey like realm. Tasting whiskey. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's my whiskey Bible.
I love it. Yeah.
Forgive me, Jim Murray, but you didn't write
actual whiskey Sorry,
Bible.
Jim.
The whiskey
Canceled
Bible
anyway.
Yes, yeah, that's right. He did. I forgot about that.
Because he called it whiskey sexy. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. Oh God. But no, I think I've burned out. Just like worn the book out. I think like 3 copies of Tasting Whiskey. I give it to everyone. I think it's the best. It's like the best whiskey book for getting beyond novice without it ever getting like too complicated and too confusing. You know what I mean? Like, I appreciate really elevates your level without you having to know biochemistry.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I remember 2 big points from that book was, one, break through the wall, which was like, try to drink a little bit every day, and like break, get through the burn. Yes. And then his second one was like, basically like associate whiskey with events, basically. Like if chocolate reminds you of being a child in Christmas time, it's like, no, just this whiskey reminds me of Christmas childhood times and stuff like that, which is huge for the whiskey tasting world. Yeah.
And it's funny you say that, because my favorite Scotch producer is actually Gordon MacPhail.
Yeah.
And Gordon MacPhail, they make whiskey. They make everything, right? They buy, although I think they're going to stop buying New Make, but
that's
forever,
right. I saw that.
They bought New Make forever. And so they've made whiskey from every Scotch distillate you can think of.
Totally.
And what's really interesting is I think Gordon MacPhail across different distilleries still has a signature. Yeah. And, flavor is so associative that I tend to, I laugh because we tend to have this kind of nutmeg cinnamon note in basically every whiskey we make. There's kind of, it's universal in our batches. And you'll find it in our single barrels. And the reason is, in my opinion, the reason is because I grew up 1 minute away from my grandmother's house. And I
Yeah.
went there all the time. And the first thing I would do when I would go in there is she would make me cinnamon sugar toast. I associate
Nice.
cinnamon, sugar, and a little bit of graininess
That's what it's all
with
about.
like heaven, like childhood heaven.
Yeah.
And as a
Mhm.
result, every whiskey I've ever loved that has like a cinnamon sugar toast note, I think is
Nice.
just a banger. I'm like,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
so when you drink our whiskeys, people all the time are like, I always get this kind of signature nutmeg, clove, cinnamon. It's always the same
Uh-huh.
kind of combination of thing. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
You're
Nanny's house.
welcome.
Just a little bit of Nanny's
Yeah.
house in every whiskey.
Yeah. That's so cool. And that's even an interesting thought. Is that, you look at some of these master distillers out there, like some of these big deal people like Jimmy Russell or like Harlan Wheatley or, Elmer T. Lee or some of these big names in or even some of the like Booker No and stuff like that. It's like I never thought of this until you just said that. It's like maybe Booker No is really into like a peanutty taste. And maybe that's just who he is. And it's not like
Yes.
the whiskey is going that way. Maybe it's just Booker No wants you to taste peanuts all, and it can
That's
be
when he
amazing.
bottles it,
Yeah.
right? Because
Hmm.
you sit there, like, the truth is, we're trying to do something with a blend, but
Totally.
I'm not gonna release a blend until it hits this spot for me
Yeah.
where I'm
I love
like,
that.
"This is it." And subconsciously or not, like, when it hits that cinnamony note for me,
Yeah.
that's when it starts to be in the range of, okay, this could be bottleable. This is in
Yeah.
this space where I'm willing to bottle it. I bet you you're
Totally.
right. I bet you it's like when he gets his peanut butter note,
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe he grew up
Bottle
eating
it.
peanut butter
Yeah.
sandwiches and hates jelly,
Hmm.
and it was
Yeah,
just like
exactly. Yeah. I was what we call on the podcast, we call it an entry buzz. It's kind of what prime the pump on before the
Yes.
podcast. I was drinking Alberta Premium cast strength rye, and that's like beautiful candy and cinnamon.
Yep.
And I'll tell you what, it's got nothing on this. So yeah, I just added a little ice.
Oh,
And
okay. Yeah.
let me go for the nose. So what I got on the like the water droplets, yeah, much more strawberry. Um, a really nice butteriness to it. More so on like a mental texture kind of way, if that makes any sense. It is buttery, almost like it was just softer candy than the hard candy neat pour, but
Yeah.
still like beautifully fruity. Strawberries and much more Sazerac 18 than Thomas H.
Yeah.
Handy.
Goes the other way. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm. Hmm. Mm. Ice don't hurt either, man. That's impressive.
That's because
It's
the fruit.
rare we'll get a pour that tastes just as amazing, if not better, with water and then ice. So this, like sometimes, especially with American whiskeys, especially with bourbons and even ryes, it's like good luck on the ice pour, and that's why we do it three
They
ways, is kind of to
disintegrate.
get an idea. Yeah, and like some Irish whiskeys can kill it with ice, and some like kind of yeah, like oh my goodness, like a Redbreast 12 cast strength with ice is like yeah.
Redbreast. Okay, I was literally about to say Redbreast 12 cast strength makes my favorite
Ah!
highball.
Oh,
It makes a
seriously? Oh my
banger
goodness.
of a highball. It makes the
Yeah.
best highball. Yes,
So
totally agree.
I think it even beats out the second on the list is Yamazaki 12. I would never want to do Yamazaki 18 with some ice. It would just kill me inside.
Yeah.
But I bet that's good too. But like
Yama 12.
Yamazaki
Yep,
12
that's
with a
great.
little ice. Oh, so good.
I
But
I think
this
when I
is
get my hands on a bottle, I just never think of a highball because I'm just like, no,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
nursing
I
this thing. Yeah.
literally this week saw one for $600 and I may or may not have bought it, but
Oh god. Yeah.
but it was
Yeah.
retail. At these days it's $600 is retail. But yes, amazing stuff. So yeah, let me take a moment. You can
Yes.
talk if you
Yes.
want to,
Go ahead.
but uh the ice pour is killing it.
I
Mm,
it's funny because I'll let you I'll talk to the listeners, right? No, it's one of the
Please.
funniest things. One of the funniest things I get asked all the time is like, what do you think about adding water? What do you think about ice? I get asked the ice question all the time.
Totally.
Do you ever add ice to whiskey? You know, and it's like it's almost like a challenging question.
Totally.
And can I swear on your podcast? I think I have.
You can
a couple
swear as
times.
much as you want.
Okay,
We're
yeah.
technically explicit.
Oh, good. I like being explicit.
Except
no,
I don't
so-
curse at all, so that's the
I know
funniest
you
part of it
haven't,
all.
which is what I like. I didn't ask you beforehand, so all right.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Do your thing.
What I've always said, one of the things I've always said is like somebody once asked me, you know, if I bought a bottle of your whiskey, and I put it on ice, would you be offended? And what I always said is like, for me personally, like, if I bought a bottle, fuck you, right? Like, if it's my bottle, I'll do whatever the hell. If I bought it, I'll do whatever I want to do with it. Like, don't tell me how to drink something I bought. I wouldn't go to your house and drink your Eagle Rare 17 and throw some rocks in it, and you know what I mean? Like, no. I wouldn't do that. But like, if you buy our stuff and you want to drink it on the rocks, friggin' go ahead. But and for me, the funny thing is, my answer for that is like, the reason the challenge with ice is from just like a science standpoint is it makes it more static because it cools it down. So there are less molecules coming off the bottle, off the liquid. So it's harder to smell and taste. That's just fact. But that doesn't make the whiskey worse. And I think we have this really bad habit in the industry of trying to always quantify things. Like, guess what? Sometimes, particularly this summer when it's been hot and muggy, I want to drink whiskey, but I want to drink it cold. Sorry. And I want a whiskey that actually drinks well cold, which is why I put my own stash of Found North on the rocks all summer long. And I love it. And, like, I bought it. Well, I made it. So fuck you.
Exactly. I mean? And it's like Redbreast 12 cask strength can taste great neat, but it also tastes amazing with ice and sometimes seltzer water.
Monster on ice. So why not?
Yeah. It doesn't hurt.
All right. So you went back into it. What happened? What'd you get?
I think the most impressive thing about it is that it didn't lose a thing. I don't know if it beat the neat or water pour, but it was in no way astringent, bitter, and sometimes that you get with like a bourbon or rye is like it turns into this bitter kind of mess. And I think that's really impressive. Is that to this moment I don't know what was best of all three pours, and that's rare because sometimes you're like it was like decent with these, but then the neat pour was the best. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna give this a rating, and I think the notes that I got off were in a way similar. But this is like one of those things is like I said, it is good with ice. And the fact is that some people just want, they finish mowing their lawn and they want to throw a few ice cubes in their whiskey. Do it, like just do it. Like, and I think that's the blessing of this whiskey is that like you can drink it whatever way you want and it's always good. And I really can't say that about a lot of whiskeys. I'm going to give it a rating. Typically, okay, so let me give you a little context into my rating scale. That when you break 9, we call it a hubbard of what? Like, as in like, that surprised me. That was amazing. And at least I do. I say if it's a hubbard of what status, it breaks 9 out of 10. And my top rating ever, I believe, is a 9.7. And I think that was in my opinion, I think the best whiskey I've ever had is Colonel H. Taylor's Seasoned Wood. I think that is like the pinnacle of whiskey for me.
Such a good whiskey.
And I think, I've had some other ones like even in the Scotch realm and even in American single malt realm that are like, upper 9.5, 9.6. This is going to take, and this is very impressive. This is probably like 1 in 20 make it above a 9.3, I would say. I'm going to give this a 9.4. I really love this. And I think listeners, so one of our listeners, Brian Rapp, he introduced me. He didn't introduce me. It was Ben Klepsig that really said, "Hey, I got it. Have you seen this? I want to buy it." And I was like, "Buy it. It looks good. I'm seeing 20+ year distillate on there. Buy it." And then a little bit later, Brian Rapp hits me up and he's like, "Hey, I've heard really good things about Found North. You should reach out." And I'm like, "I'll reach out today." And that was the day I reached out to you guys.
Oh, that's cool.
But that being said, I can't wait for batch 8. And I'll say this to our listeners. How many bottles do you think you have left on your website?
I think 2.
Oh, buy it now. BIN, everyone. Is that really right? Oh, I feel so honored to be able to have one of these bottles.
I think we have 2.
That's crazy. So Brian Rapp, buy it now. Actually, forget it, Brian. I won't wait until Monday. I'm going to say buy it now. I'll text you and I'll message you on Instagram and say, just get it before you sell out. So I love this. I mean, so you said this is one of your most proud batches. How's batch 8 looking?
I'm obsessed with batch 8.
Nice.
No, that's the I think that's probably the most exciting thing about how we make whiskey, which is just that, like, you're every time we sit down to make something new, we are jacked up about it. You know what I mean? It's not like, all right, we got to make this.
That's fun, man.
And I can imagine how stressful that is. Actually, one of my favorite just hilarious part. I found it hilarious stories is I often will use this as it's kind of a testament to how much like situation can influence how you drink a whiskey or how you taste a whiskey, or like or how susceptible we are to, you know, people's opinions and things like that. One of the funniest things for me was I in 2017 I had the rare privilege of going and spending 4 or 5 hours with Brent Elliott in his lab.
No way.
We went through some crazy ass whiskeys.
Really?
I mean, just totally.
This was before you even started making whiskey. That's so cool.
Yeah. And like, no, actually, I interviewed him. I wrote something about it that I don't think anybody read. And I when we were struggling, we went back and reread what we had written about how he made whiskey, and it gave us some sort of secrets into the process that we utilize to this day. But the funniest thing was when I got there, his quality control team was in the process of going through, like, I think it was 52 different vattings of small batch.
Oh, wow.
4 rows of small batch.
And
they had them all lined up with the little, toppers on top of the little glasses, some sniffing glasses. And each one was just A, B, C, D, E, F, G, double A, double B, double C, all the way down from A to double Z. And I was like, what? I was like, what is this? And he was like, this is our quality control team goes through all of these, and this is the control, and we make sure it tastes like the control, and blah, blah, blah. And, but I remember, being like, okay, so how does the process work? And he's like, everyone gives it a 1 through 5, whether it's like on the money, that's 5. If it's close, that's 4. And if anybody of I think at the time it was like 8, maybe 10 people, give it a 3 or less, we troubleshoot that batch. We go in and we say, all right, what's wrong? How do we fix it? Is it salvageable? Why does it taste what we want? And I was like, holy cow, it's pretty stressful. And he was like, it can be. And so I'm like, do you mind? And he's like, yeah, go through them. So I'm like rapid fire nosing through these, I'm just like, boom, 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 boom. And I was straight up messing with him. And I just go, there's something wrong with M. And he was like, nah. He's like, nah. Really? You know what I mean?
It's so funny.
I was like, yeah, there's something wrong with them. And he comes over and he's nosing it and he's looking at me and he's like, I didn't think there was anything wrong with them, but now I feel like there's something wrong with them. Like, are you messing with me or not? And I was like, I'm messing with you.
So cool.
Like, there's nothing wrong. And at the end of it, he was like,
cool, though.
He was like, after 5 hours, he's like, I'm gonna go back to M now. He was like, now you've got it in my head, and now I need to go back to M and make sure it's good. And it was hilarious. So cool. It was hilarious. But it also is very revealing of how challenging it is for these guys to make the whiskey taste the same over and over and over again. It is
Yeah.
way it's just a different level of difficulty, and it's a different
Yeah.
type of difficulty than what we're doing, which is like,
Yeah.
we made a great whiskey. How can we riff off of what we've done in the past? Or like, how do we move
Yeah.
this in the next direction?
Yeah.
And wherever we end up, as long as we think it's good, that's a win for us, you know?
Yeah.
And so that process is really exciting. And that's why like eight is just woof. We used a
Oh,
new component. Um, I haven't told anyone this, but we used a new component, a tiny bit of a component that was aged in a Madeira cask. Um,
ooh,
and it has this like sultry, juicy red fruit, but
nice.
like dark, like you know, not I don't, you
Ooh.
know, like this has this sort
I
of
think that's a
bright,
great note because
lovely
I'm not
strawberry
getting
puree.
dark notes from this, so that might
No,
be,
no,
like,
this goes
super
in a different
different.
direction.
Yeah.
It's like
Mhm.
totally. I I just I think of like a I don't know why, but um, when I think of these like certain tasting notes, I think of them on gradients of shade,
Yeah.
and you get kind
Totally.
of like you
Yeah.
get like a mood to the whiskey, right? You know
No,
what
no,
I'm
I
talking about?
totally get it. Like, the difference between a wheated bourbon and a rye bourbon is a
Totally.
darkness to me. Yeah.
There's yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And this
Mhm.
whiskey reminds me of like the Madeira, just the Madeira aspect of it
Totally.
is like a dive bar in Louisiana. You know what I mean? Like you're just like
Ooh,
it's just
sold me
like
already.
yeah, I mean, oh god. And that yeah, I'm really excited about it. I'm really
That's
excited about
cool.
it.
So, okay, when's batch 8 coming out?
There we're looking for probably something like a November 1 launch, is my
Okay.
guess.
That's
If
sweet.
we don't screw anything
Soon.
up, we should be yeah, it's
Yeah.
soon. Um, and we have another release, we have another release coming out this year as well, the oldest
Nice.
release we've ever done. Um, we you know, we've done this so when we started, all we did was
Yeah,
we buy the whiskey we need for a blend, we blend it, we bottle it,
totally.
right?
Mhm.
Um, but over time, we've started to like buy components and re-rack them, right? And that's
Yeah.
kind of the next evolution. But one of the things we did when we created our single barrel program was creating this blend and then re-racking the entire blend, right? So you
Yeah.
make this blend and then you put it in all these different barrels. And we
Mhm.
loved that process so much that we were like, what if we did this to scale, not just like single
Yeah.
barrels? What if we
Mhm.
create a blend with the intention of further maturing it? So we leave space for it to grow into its wood profile. And then we
Yeah.
pick different wood profiles based on, you know, where we want this thing to go. Um,
Totally.
and it's, not very, I don't know anyone who's doing that.
Yeah.
I really don't. And it's a little bit more arduous because you literally have to like blend it to profile,
Yeah.
age it, and then reblend it to profile. Because we're not going to just be like,
Yeah,
okay,
makes
yeah, now
sense.
just dump them in no matter what. It's like, no, no, now that
Yeah.
we have to reblend it. It's a little easier because they're starting from the same foundation, but
Yeah.
you still have to get it right. So it's like it's an expensive process from a time and a labor standpoint, but it
Totally.
is so cool. I mean, it is
That's
like
cool.
so that we have our first sort of major release that way is going to also be our oldest release, and that's going to
That's
come out this fall as well. It
Is that gonna
is
be a batch, or is that gonna be, like, how are you gonna list that?
that's going to have a name, which we've
Okay,
also never done
cool.
before. So
Ooh, that's
yeah. That's
exciting.
going to have a name,
That's
and
sweet.
I think people are going to. We wrapped up the new label the other
Nice.
day, and I had nothing to do with it, but it looks awesome.
Uh-huh. No, that's all good. So, as we wrap up here, I guess we'll close it up, but, where can people find more about Found North?
Yeah. So we actually write basically a full description of what the intention was, what the whiskeys were behind every blend at
That's so cool.
foundnorthwhiskey.com.
Mhm.
That's whiskey without an E. That was like a 2 month
Nice.
debate for our company, right? Because
Uh-huh.
we bottle it. We're all Americans. We bottle it here in
Yeah,
the US. And it's like,
but it's
but Canadian
Canadian.
whiskeys,
Mhm.
yeah. So we are like, okay, we're gonna go without the E because we feel
I
like
like
that's
that.
more.
Well, even Maker's Mark goes without the E.
That's because the one really ironic thing is, I believe the original laws written for American whiskey do not have an E.
Oh, that's
Um,
cool.
Yeah. Fun
I
little
can dig that.
super nerd tidbit there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. No, so it's foundnorthwhiskey.com without any um follow us on Instagram. We try to release we try not to just we don't want everything to just be kind of a like a thirst trap kind of thing.
Totally.
It's not just
Yeah.
like bottles, bottles, bottles. We try
Yeah.
our Instagram to be kind of informative, even if it's
That's
short
cool.
form about what we're trying to do and how we approach the whiskey. So yeah,
So
that's the best.
where do you ship to? Because I noticed you can buy on your website.
So we have to use an ecom provider because like
Okay.
we from a licensing standpoint,
Totally.
we basically like we have an import and production license, but we don't have a retail license. We're
Yeah.
not allowed to have one. So we
Mhm.
use a third party ecom provider through our website, um,
That's cool.
and that can get to like 40 some odd states. But we
That's great.
also have it. On now it might be sold out on shared pour right now, but we also have it on
Okay.
shared pour and sealbox, and that actually
Okay.
allows us to get to all 50 states, which is
That's
pretty sweet.
awesome.
And
Hey.
then hey, we're also in like 20 states. One of our best markets is Alaska, which is
Nice.
hilarious.
Yeah.
But we very stupidly we didn't realize that like the northern states would really like a whiskey called Found North.
Uh-huh.
That was
That's
not the
great. Yeah,
intention
I
behind it,
mean,
but it's like
Ben Klepsig is
Oregon
in,
reaches out to us, it's
Wisconsin.
like yeah,
Yeah.
Wisconsin we sell a
Yeah.
lot of whiskey in Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota,
Nice.
like upstate New York loves our whiskey,
Hey.
Alaska, Oregon, it's like, oh, okay. Washington, and then Texas, because Texas loves whiskey in general.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, that's
And
great.
actually loves
Well,
Canadian whiskey.
I believe it actually. Nick, this has been a pleasure. What is batch 7 and batch 8 gonna cost, for batch 8 at least?
Batch 8, I think will be 160-ish,
Okay.
maybe 160 and
Nice.
change. Yeah, and it will
That's awesome.
be, I think, 18-year age stated. Um,
Nice.
yeah, and this was one. It's funny because you buy vintage corn components and then you're blending them and
Totally.
you're like, wait a second, what was the month? And you look at it and it's like, oh, the month was July and it's June, and you're like,
Uh-huh. You're like, "What do I do?"
shit.
Especially the youngest one, yeah. But
But
still,
we
like, 18 is nothing to, like,
no,
bat an
particularly when we're
eyelash at or
blending in,
whatever.
like, 20 some odd year old whiskeys in there as well. It's
Yeah,
kind of a joke, right? It's like,
that's
yeah.
sweet. Well, Nick, thank you
Cool,
so
man.
much.
Yeah, thank
Listeners,
you.
I highly recommend Found North, at least from batch 7. And I'm hoping to be able to figure out batch 8 and from there on. So,
And we'll get
I
you some
hope we
batch.
can invite you back in the future, Nick.
Oh, I'm ready.
Um, but this has been great. And any last encouragement to our listeners or anything like that before we close it up?
No, I just, no, I just wanna say thank you. We really appreciate, uh all the folks who were encouraging you. Like
Uh-huh.
we do. I don't think we might have paid for like one advertisement once. I don't think we've paid
Really?
for a single advertisement ever. Our growth is almost entirely driven
Word of mouth?
by like word of mouth,
Wow.
podcasters, Reddit.
Yeah.
We do very little of any of the kind of mainstream stuff, and so it means a lot
It's
to
good
us
when your
that people
product
reach
is
out.
great. So, yeah.
That's the hope, is that you make good enough whiskey that keeps happening. So
Totally.
just thank you, and
Well,
thanks everybody for
yeah.
singing its praises and getting
Yeah.
you to invite us on.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben Klepsig. Thanks, Brian Rapp.
Yeah.
We appreciate you guys. And yeah, Nick, thank you again. We'll close it up here. I like to finish with we call the hopes. And Nick, I hope you keep making great whiskey. I hope we can get our hands on batch 8 and the named batch coming up. And
Oh
more
baby.
so, Nick, I really hope that you are still, as time goes by, things just get more and more exciting about the batches you put out.
Appreciate
So,
that. Yeah,
but
thank you,
most
man.
of all, listeners, I hope that our love of whiskey lifted your spirits.